12-year-old Jasmine Cole stepped off the yellow school bus, tightening her grip on the straps of her faded backpack. The sun hovered above the rooftops of Clear Ridge High School, casting long shadows over the brick courtyard. It was her first day again. She'd lost count of how many times she'd been the new girl. This was her 5th school in just 3 years. Some kids moved because their parents got promoted or bought a new house. Jasmine moved because her foster situations never lasted long. But she didn't complain. Complaining didn't change anything. She kept her head down, hoping to slip past the curious eyes of students gathering by the front entrance. Groups laughed and talked like they'd known each other their whole lives. Jasmine had seen it before. Kids who grew up in the same neighborhoods, shared summer camps, and had inside jokes she'd never understand. Clear Ridge wasn't anything fancy. A typical suburban school tucked in a Houston neighborhood where most families drove shiny SUVs and had matching holiday pajamas. Jasmine didn't care about fitting in. She had one goal: stay invisible. Blend in, keep her head down, survive the year. Inside, the hallway buzzed with energy. Slamming lockers, screeching sneakers, teachers calling out for tardy slips. Jasmine walked slowly, holding her schedule like a lifeline. She scanned the locker numbers, mentally mapping out where to go next. She'd done this before. Find a locker, eat lunch alone, identify who to avoid, and that's when she saw him. Landon Brooks, age 14, leaned casually against a row of lockers. He wore a varsity jacket even though football season had ended. His sandy blonde hair was styled just enough to look like he didn't try, and his smile carried a sharp edge. Landon didn't need to talk loud. People listened to him anyway. Around him stood a circle of athletes and admirers, laughing at whatever clever insult he'd just made. Jasmine didn't need to ask who he was. Every school had a version of him, the self-proclaimed king. Good-looking, rich, untouchable. But there was always more beneath the surface. Jasmine noticed the way his friends laughed a little too hard, shifted nervously when he spoke. It was the kind of fear disguised as friendship she'd seen before. She knew his type. She didn't plan to draw his attention, but fate had other plans. As she passed his group, someone deliberately bumped her shoulder, not enough to knock her down, but enough to make her books scatter across the floor. Laughter echoed. Jasmine crouched to pick up her things, jaw tight, cheeks burning. Well, look what we've got here," Landon said smoothly, his voice laced with mock surprise. She didn't look up. "You knew," he added, a lazy grin on his face. Jasmine said nothing. She stood, clutching her books, and brushed past him like he didn't exist. "Where's your manners?" Landon called after her, still amused. She kept walking. She knew his kind thrived on reactions, fear, anger, embarrassment. Silence starved them. But as she walked away, she felt a hand tug slightly on her backpack. It wasn't hard, just enough to stop her. She turned slowly, locking eyes with him. "You shouldn't have done that," she said, quietly. His smirk widened. "Oh, yeah? And why's that?" Jasmine didn't answer. Not yet. She didn't need to fight. Not here, not now. Because this time she wasn't just some new girl trying to survive. This time she had a secret. And Landon Brooks had no idea how badly he'd just messed with the wrong girl. The rest of the day moved like slow motion for Jasmine Cole. She kept to the back of her classrooms, answered only when the teacher called her name, and avoided eye contact with just about everyone. At lunch, she found an empty table near the edge of the cafeteria and ate quietly, her tray perfectly organized, untouched for the first 10 minutes. Landon Brooks sat at the center of the cafeteria like it was his throne. His friends surrounded him, loud, confident, and careless. Every now and then she caught him glancing her way, that same amused smirk tugging at his mouth. But he didn't approach. Not yet. By the time the last bell rang, Jasmine felt her muscles relax. The Houston heat still shimmered across the sidewalk as she walked toward the school parking lot, pulling out her phone to check the time. She was halfway to the bus stop when she heard it. "Hey, new girl." She turned. Landon stood a few feet behind her, hands shoved in his pockets. A lazy grin stretched across his face. 3 of his friends flanked him like shadows. Jasmine sighed. "What do you want?" she asked flatly. He took a step closer. "You got an attitude problem, you know that?" She didn't reply. "You think you're better than me or something?" he added, narrowing his eyes. That made her laugh. Not a nervous laugh, not even sarcastic, just amused. And that, more than anything, threw Landon off balance. She stepped forward, just enough to speak low, her voice calm. "I think you should walk away." Landon blinked, his smile faltering for a second. "Oh, yeah? And why's that?" Jasmine didn't answer. Instead, she stepped back and pressed something on her phone screen. A second later, the unmistakable sound of a roaring engine echoed down the street. Heads turned. A sleek, black Dodge Charger Hellcat rolled to the curb, engine growling like a beast barely contained. The tinted window lowered slowly. Behind the wheel sat Dominic Cole, known to the rest of the world as Vin Diesel. He wore a plain white t-shirt and sunglasses, but he didn't need any introductions. Every kid in that parking lot knew exactly who he was. The entire lot went silent. Landon's jaw dropped. His friends stopped laughing. Jasmine turned to him, finally allowing a smile to curve across her face. Cool, controlled. "Still think I'm just some random girl?" she asked. Landon didn't answer. He couldn't. Vin Diesel gave a small nod toward Jasmine. "Get in, kid," he said, voice low but commanding. She didn't hesitate. As she walked past Landon, the silence cracked, whispers buzzing through the crowd. A dozen phones suddenly raised to record the moment. Jasmine slid into the passenger seat, shut the door, and the Hellcat peeled away with a smooth roar, leaving behind stunned stares and one very pale, very quiet Landon Brooks. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city of Houston blurred past the windows in streaks of late-afternoon gold and asphalt gray. Finally, Jasmine let out a long exhale. "That was dramatic." Vin smirked. "A little." She shook her head. "I didn't want anyone to find out like that." "Better than letting some punk walk all over you," he said. "I wasn't going to let him," Jasmine replied. "I was just waiting." Vin glanced sideways, one eyebrow raised. "Waiting for what?" "For the right moment," she said, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. He chuckled. "You sound like me when I was your age." She grinned. "That's a scary thought." They both laughed, the tension finally slipping from her shoulders. But deep down, Jasmine knew this wasn't over. Landon Brooks wasn't the kind of guy to walk away quietly. If anything, he was probably already planning his next move. People like him didn't like to lose, especially not in front of an audience. Still, something had shifted. Jasmine hadn't just walked into school and tried to blend in anymore. She had drawn the attention of the most powerful student in the school and turned the tables in front of everyone. He might still think he was in control, but he had no idea. She hadn't even started yet. The next morning, Jasmine Cole walked through the front doors of Clear Ridge High with her hoodie pulled up and earbuds in. No music, just white noise. It was easier to hear the whispers that way, and they were everywhere. She didn't need to guess what they were about. The videos were already online. Dozens of clips of her stepping into Vin Diesel's car, captions ranging from "Fast and Furious Daughter" to new girl just ended Landon Brooks. She didn't care about the attention. She cared about what came next. As she passed the main hall, she spotted Landon right where she expected, by his locker, surrounded by his crew. Except this time, they weren't laughing. Not really. They were trying, sure, but it felt forced. Their eyes darted toward Jasmine as she walked by. Landon's jaw tightened. He didn't smirk. He didn't speak. But Jasmine could feel it, the tension simmering just beneath the surface. He wasn't done. By lunch, things had shifted. Jasmine made her way across the cafeteria with her tray, heading toward her usual quiet corner. As she passed the jock's table, one of Landon's cronies, a bulky sophomore named Zach Trent, casually stretched his leg out. She tripped. The tray tilted, her drink sloshed, but she caught herself before falling. A few students gasped. Zach leaned back, grinning like a toddler who just knocked over a tower of blocks. "No reaction," he sneered. "Thought you were tougher than that." Jasmine didn't even look at him. She adjusted her tray and kept walking. But then she stopped, turned halfway, looked Zach dead in the eye. "I just didn't realize cavemen still went to high school." The nearby tables erupted. Even some of Zach's own friends chuckled, until Landon shot them a look. Jasmine took her seat, opened her juice, and began eating like nothing happened. It was a small win, but it was enough. Landon needed to remind the school who was king. He wasn't used to being questioned, and Jasmine, she'd just declared war, without ever raising her voice. That afternoon, it escalated. Jasmine opened her locker and froze. Books dumped out in a pile. Ink scribbles across the metal. Daddy's Girl, Vin's Pet, and one crude cartoon she didn't bother to look at for long. A circle of students had already gathered. Some snickered, some stared, uncomfortable. None stepped in. Jasmine didn't flinch. She knelt, picked up each book slowly, neatly. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. When she was done, she shut the locker calmly and walked away. And that silence? It said more than 1,000 insults ever could. That night, she sat at the kitchen counter while Vin prepped dinner. He chopped onions with the same ease he drifted a car around a corner. Jasmine sat quiet, swirling the ice in her glass. "They trashed my locker today," she said finally. Vin paused mid-chop. "Anyone see?" "Everyone." He set the knife down. "You want me to call someone? Principal? School board?" She shook her head. "Nope." "You sure?" Jasmine smirked. "I'm going to let him dig his own grave." Vin leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, his signature half-grin forming. "Now, that sounds familiar." She smiled. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about control. And Landon Brooks was already unraveling. The more he pushed, the more people would start to question why he felt so threatened. Jasmine just needed to wait and apply pressure at the right moments. The following day, she walked in like nothing had happened. But the vibe in school had changed. People were talking. Some admired her. Others avoided her. And a few, Landon's crew, looked at her like she'd flipped the school's food chain upside down. She didn't care. She just walked. Confident. Quiet. Strategic. By lunch, the tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. Jasmine expected it this time. Another jab, another insult. What she didn't expect? Landon standing up and raising his voice in the middle of the cafeteria. "Hey, Jasmine," he called. "Still crying about your little locker?" The room went still. Dozens of heads turned. Jasmine set her tray down carefully. Then, with the calm of someone holding all the cards, she replied, "Funny, you keep bringing up my dad like you didn't nearly pee your pants when he pulled up." A beat of silence. Then, "Oh, ah." The cafeteria exploded. Landon's smirk died mid-smirk. His face flushed red. His fists clenched, but he stayed frozen, caught, for the first time in his life, in the losing seat. Jasmine sat down and took a slow bite of her apple. Her eyes locked on his. He didn't say another word, not that day, but Jasmine knew he was still planning something. And that was fine, because so was she. Jasmine Cole knew exactly what she was doing. Guys like Landon Brooks? She'd seen them before. The ones who needed an audience, who got their power from laughter and fear and silence, who were terrified of being irrelevant. What scared them more than anything wasn't being punched, it was being ignored. And now, Landon was spiraling. After the cafeteria blow-up, the whispers had multiplied. By the next morning, Jasmine didn't even have to say anything. Her silence had become a weapon. She walked into Clear Ridge High like it was just another Tuesday, but it wasn't. She passed groups of students who stopped mid-conversation. Phones slipped into pockets. Eyes followed her with that mix of curiosity and respect. Some even smiled at her. She didn't smile back. Landon, on the other hand, was starting to show cracks. When she passed him at his locker, his usual pose, one shoulder against the metal, arms crossed, chin high, looked stiffer than usual. His friends still surrounded him, but they laughed less, watched more, especially her. He said nothing. And that silence, that was loud. Jasmine didn't need to win the crowd, she just needed Landon to keep reacting. Every insult, every little stunt, it chipped away at the illusion he'd built around himself. The more he tried to hurt her, the more it exposed him. And right on cue, lunchtime brought the next move. Jasmine carried her tray like normal. As she approached her usual table, a familiar sneaker shot out from beneath a chair, this time from Trevor, one of Landon's quieter sidekicks. She stumbled, but didn't fall. She turned, raised an eyebrow. "Really?" she said flatly. "You're all sharing one brain now?" Laughter burst from several tables. Trevor looked around like he didn't know whether to laugh or apologize. Landon didn't laugh. He just stared at her. His expression unreadable. Later that day, Jasmine opened her locker and found nothing out of place. No marker, no trash. Just her books, neatly stacked like she'd left them. That should have felt like a win. But it didn't. It felt like the calm before the storm. That night, Jasmine sat at the dining table while Vin Diesel grilled chicken outside. The smell drifted in through the open sliding door. She stared at her phone, not texting, just scrolling, watching. Vin stepped inside, holding 2 plates. "He quiet?" he asked, setting one down in front of her. Jasmine nodded. "Too quiet." Vin sipped his iced tea.
Guys like him, when they get desperate, they stop playing by the rules. He already wasn't playing by the rules, Vin smirked. True. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. I think he's planning something bigger, something dumb. Vin raised an eyebrow. You ready? I'm not just ready, Jasmine said. I'm baiting him. Vin's smile widened. That's my girl. By Friday morning, Clear Ridge High was buzzing. Something had happened. Jasmine knew it the second she stepped inside. Clusters of students huddled by lockers, voices low, faces lit with that half-guilty, half-excited expression high schoolers get when gossip turns real. She kept walking, calm, collected, until she saw it. A crowd had formed outside her locker. She pushed her way through, already guessing what she'd find, but even she was surprised. Taped across the metal were printed screenshots, edited photos of her in class, eating lunch, walking through the halls. Below each was a fake caption. Thinks she's special just 'cause her daddy's famous. Acting like she runs the place. Without Vin, she's just another broken foster kid. Some kids gasped. Others laughed. Not at her, but at the desperation of it all. Jasmine didn't react. She took a slow breath, pulled the paper off, and crumpled it neatly in her fist. Then she turned around, and Landon was already there, standing across the hall, watching. Their eyes met. No words. But Jasmine didn't need words. She just looked at him, really looked, long enough for everyone around them to feel the tension, long enough for Landon to shift his weight uncomfortably, like her silence was a mirror too honest to stand in front of. Then she walked away. And that, more than any comeback or insult, was what really got to him. Because in that moment, Landon Brooks finally understood. He wasn't the one in control anymore. By Monday morning, Clear Ridge High was a pressure cooker, and Jasmine Cole was holding the lid. She'd spent the weekend doing exactly what Landon Brooks never expected. Nothing. No angry Instagram post, no call to the principal, no dramatic hallway showdown, just silence. Because Jasmine wasn't interested in payback. She wanted impact, and timing was everything. The screenshots on her locker had been sloppy. Mean, yes, but weak. They looked like the desperate move of a guy trying too hard to win a game he no longer understood. And Jasmine knew the moment she walked away from that mess, Landon was finished digging his own grave. Now, all she had to do was show everyone just how deep it went. It started with airdrops. Second period. Phones pinged across campus. Notifications lighting up screens during math class, Spanish quizzes, even gym. Some kids laughed, some gasped. By third period, the hallways were buzzing. And by lunch, the whole school knew. Jasmine sat at her usual corner table, tray untouched, phone in hand. Across the room, Landon sat in the middle of his table like always, except this time, the space around him felt different, lighter, looser, like the spell he'd held over everyone was slowly breaking. His phone lit up. His jaw tightened. He was starting to realize what she'd done. The airdrops were screenshots, real ones this time, pulled from anonymous accounts, locked group chats, and private DMS. Jasmine didn't even need to explain them. The messages spoke for themselves. That freshman girl? Looks like a dog. I'd rather date my truck. Coach is an idiot. If I wasn't white and rich, I wouldn't even be QB. Mr. Alvarez smells like expired tacos and failure. Some were worse, racist, sexist, gross, and all of them had Landon's name at the top. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was evidence. Some of his so-called friends started to shift away from him during lunch. A few actually got up and walked to different tables. Landon watched them go, his face tight, eyes scanning the room like he was trying to find the exit from a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He looked across the room, at Jasmine. She didn't look away, didn't blink, didn't smile. That, more than anything, rattled him, because it meant she wasn't trying to win. She already had. After school, Jasmine walked out to the parking lot as usual, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her hoodie up. The sun hit the pavement in golden streaks. She didn't have to look far. Landon was waiting, arms crossed, leaning against his car, eyes stormy. No audience this time, just the two of them. She stopped a few feet away. Let me guess, another speech? He didn't answer at first, just stared. You think you're better than me? He finally asked, voice low. No, Jasmine replied. I just don't need to prove I'm worse. His jaw clenched. You think this ends with you winning some popularity contest? She shrugged. I don't care about popularity. I care about truth. And now, people see who you really are. You had this planned all along, didn't you? He snapped. She tilted her head. You planned your own downfall, Landon. I just took notes. He stepped forward. You don't know a damn thing about me. Her voice softened, but not out of kindness. It was sharper, more cutting. I know you need people to laugh when you insult someone, because that's the only way you feel like you matter. I know you use fear, because you're terrified of being forgotten. And I know that underneath all the noise, you don't know who you are without power. He didn't respond, couldn't. So she leaned in, her voice steady. You were never the king of this school, Landon. You were just the loudest kid with the least to say. and with that she walked past him, calm and unshaken, just as she had on her very first day. That night, Jasmine sat at the kitchen table again, a cup of tea between her hands. Vin stood at the stove, silent for a long moment before finally asking, "You dropped it, didn't you?" She nodded. "How bad?" "Bad enough." He raised an eyebrow. "They suspend him?" "They're still reviewing everything, but his social rep's already gone." Vin exhaled slowly. "You sure you don't want to celebrate?" Jasmine shook her head. "I didn't do it to celebrate. I just wanted him to stop." Vin looked at her for a moment longer, then nodded. "You stopped him." She leaned back in the chair, letting the quiet fill the room. But even as relief settled in her chest, Jasmine knew this wasn't just about Landon. It never was. It was about walking into a place where no one knew her name, and refusing to let someone else write her story. And now, she was finally holding the pen. The storm had passed. By the time Friday rolled around, the hallways of Clear Ridge High felt different, lighter, louder, but in a natural way. Students joked, lockers slammed, sneakers squeaked, but the undercurrent of fear that used to ripple beneath it all was gone. Jasmine Cole walked through it like she belonged, not because she'd become popular, not because she was the daughter of a movie star, but because she no longer had anything to hide. No one whispered when she walked by anymore, not in that wary, skeptical way. If anything, a few students gave her nods. Some smiled. One girl in gym class even asked if Jasmine wanted to hang out after school sometime. It wasn't a spotlight. It was respect. And for Jasmine, that meant more than all the attention in the world. Landon Brooks, on the other hand, had disappeared. Not literally. He still showed up to class, still sat in the back row during history, and barely looked up during English. But the crowd around him had thinned to nearly nothing. His entourage? Gone. His jokes? Met with awkward silence. His swagger? Nowhere to be found. The screenshots Jasmine had released hadn't just bruised his reputation. They'd shattered the illusion he'd built over years. He wasn't the king anymore. He was just a guy with too much ego and not enough heart. And people had finally stopped pretending otherwise. It wasn't revenge. Jasmine didn't stare him down in the halls. She didn't mock him or gloat or try to make herself into a hero. She simply lived. And that, more than anything, was what made it sting. Because Landon had built his identity on control, and Jasmine had shown the entire school that he never really had any. That Monday, Jasmine sat at lunch with a small group. Real conversations, real laughter, nothing performative. No one asked about Vin Diesel. No one cared about the car or the airdrops. They asked about her favorite music, whether she liked horror movies, why she dipped her fries in ranch and hot sauce. Jasmine smiled more that week than she had in the last 2 years combined. And for the first time since she stepped off that bus, she felt something strange, but warm. She felt at home. That afternoon, she headed to her locker and found something she didn't expect. A folded piece of paper taped to the door. She peeled it off and opened it. "You were right. L." Just 2 lines. No excuses, no signature beyond the single letter. But she knew who it was from. Jasmine stared at the note for a moment. Then she folded it back up, tucked it into her notebook, and said nothing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something close to understanding, and maybe that was enough. That night, Jasmine sat in the garage with Vin. He was tinkering under the hood of the Charger, the smell of oil and metal hanging in the air. Jasmine sat on the workbench, swinging her legs, sipping a cold orange soda. "He apologized," she said after a while. Vin looked up. "Out loud?" "Number 1 paper." He chuckled. "Classic coward move." Jasmine shrugged. "I didn't need an apology, just needed him to see it." "And did he?" She smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think he did." Vin wiped his hands on a rag and walked over. "So what now?" Jasmine leaned back, her shoulders finally relaxed. "Now," she said, "I get to just be a kid." Vin grinned. "That's a good plan." And for once, it really was. The next morning, Jasmine didn't wear her hoodie. She didn't need to. She walked through the halls of Clear Ridge High like she wasn't hiding from anything. Because she wasn't. Not from whispers, not from bullies, not from her past. She passed Landon at his locker. He glanced up. Their eyes met for the briefest second. No hate, no fear, just two people who had finally seen each other clearly. And in that moment, Jasmine realized something powerful. You don't win by being louder. You win by being unshakable. She didn't need to be the queen of the school. She just needed to be herself. Fully, completely, unapologetically. And that was more than enough. Life lesson. Power isn't about noise. It's about knowing who you are. In life, you're going to meet people like Landon Brooks, loud, confident, and used to being in control. They'll try to make you feel small, just so they can feel big. They thrive on attention, on fear, on silence from others. But the real power? It doesn't come from shouting the loudest or pushing the hardest. It comes from knowing who you are and standing in that truth, even when it's hard, even when you're outnumbered. Jasmine Cole didn't fight back with fists or drama. She didn't try to be liked or feared. She simply stayed true to herself, held her ground, and let the truth speak louder than any insult ever could. The lesson here is simple but powerful. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight dirty to win, and you never have to become someone else to prove your worth. Because people like Landon, they fall apart the moment someone stops playing their game. And people like Jasmine, they rise, not by force but by integrity. In a world full of noise, be someone who leads with quiet strength. Eventually, the world notices, and more importantly, you'll respect the person staring back at you in the mirror.